All right, good afternoon. Welcome back here to Trader Minute. Great to have you aboard. Very interesting day in the market. In fact, I think today, for me at least, there have been days they've had up and down big moves and whatnot. And, we've taken a look at day trading those and everything else. But in terms of just overall interest for, potential long positions going forward, I think today's not necessarily a trigger day. It's not a day to get real trigger happy, but I do think there's some very interesting stuff, kind of transpiring, setting up here, and some things that, need to be taken into account, going forward. One of the things that I mentioned last week is that typically we will see some bullish Katie or bullish trend rider signals come into play before we actually see the market vibe turn. And that's what we have happening here a little bit this week. We didn't have anything that finalized as a Katie signal yesterday, but we had all those 3-7 crossovers that we talked about, from Chipotle Mexican Grill to, many others. And, we see a lot of them getting a little bit of follow through here on the day today. And we actually have some signals trying to confirm, here today. So let's go take a look. Let's start with the market vibe. I'm just going to pull up a scan. You've seen me pull up this scan quite a few times. It's just the number of stocks trading above and below the 7-day moving average. That's all it is. And, here we are with 239. We almost have half of the market trading back above its 7-day moving average, right? Almost half. Now, if you go look in tech, it's not quite that much. But if you look at the sectors where this is happening, communication services, your Verizons and your Charter Communications, your Comcast, CBS, those stocks. And then look sector-wise. It's consumer discretionary. I mean, it's consumer discretionary. And then it's consumer staples. Oh, 3 measly energy stocks. And then financials. See any tech stocks on here? Not a single tech. Not a single industrial. Not a single material stock. I've never seen it. I've never seen, that in, with that list. But it's one of those where that list is so great in terms of the just pure quantity of those stocks that you can't, you don't get those, you don't get those others even showing up on the list yet. You got to get all the way to the back of the list. And yeah, it's alphabetical order. And ultimately there's some industrial and some materials here, but nowhere near the same quantity as we see the consumer names, and that's what this rally is about. That's what's getting bought. It's consumer names getting bought up, which is really interesting because housing's dead. Housing is housing's the numbers keep ticking down, and housing has to be dead because the consumer's dead. Look at where the money's going. Even housing stocks here, they have seen strong money flows coming in over the last week. And this is where the early money flow is going here in this market. Now, I know the initial inclination for most people is to say, oh, well, let me either go buy it now or, oh, man, I already missed my chance. It already bottomed. And the reality is both of those are wrong. It's one of those where this is going to be a group where they have shown their stripes, and it is going to be an outperforming group for the next 2 to 3 months. And so it's one of those where, you find a good risk-reward entry point, and you run with it. Now, there are 2 trend rider signals emerging today, both of them in that sector, in that group. One of them's with Macy's, and we just have not seen trend rider signals in this market for months. And the reason has been volume. When we've had the Pierces, we haven't had the volumes coming into play. Macy's, very nice volume element here. Beautiful trend rider bull signal. Not a great risk-reward signal. for wanting to step in and buy an option. It's one where, if it pulls back to the 7, like a lot of times we'll see on the trend rider, they'll pierce and then they'll pull back to the 7. It's one that, could get wrecked pretty good if that happens, or at least the option would get wrecked pretty good if that happens. So for me, would I like to buy? Yes, but this is now one where, okay, it'll come down to pulling up my hourly, getting a good risk reward on the hourly, or getting a good signal there on my hourly and running with it. The other one is Chipotle Mexican Grill, CMG. And if you've been with us for a little while, you know that ultimately I am extremely bullish on this stock. And it's one that I expect will trade in the $600, $700 area. It's one where the bearish thesis is so overplayed. We talked about it back here in February in this mass drop pop, bottom in. And it doesn't mean it goes straight up. You can see for months chopped around, earnings then gapped up, and then, there's gap down on some fears of food safety, we still see that playing out. We still see the bears kind of, loading in, and then magically we see all sorts of food safety reports, and recently the last many have been discredited, so something hinky's going on, but we saw Chipotle earnings last week. If you just look at where the trends are going with the company, with the stock, it is very positive. And we're getting a trend rider bull signal here today. And there's been plenty of volume, associated here with this stock. It didn't trigger a Katie signal yesterday. I was kind of surprised. I thought it would. It had the 3-7 crossover action here. But, the consolidation risk was just a little high, but it is triggering a trend rider here today. So what's that tell me? That tells me, look, the next dip I can be a buyer of, right? We talk about a lot of these stocks. They're going to show their stripes. They're going to show their signal. And then where do you buy? Well, you could chase into it. And you know what? It might go vertical. We've seen it happen many times. The little bit more conservative route is to wait for that next higher low to come in. That's the more predictable. That's the more, or the better risk reward scenario when we see that come in. And so I think with both Macy's, both Macy's and Chipotle Mexican Grill, they're showing their stripes, and they're both saying, look, buy me on the next dip. Now, American Airlines, we talked about this morning, right? We looked at American, and we talked about what was going on, the story there with American. And, this is one that, if you look, it does have a 3-7 crossover going on it, but the consolidation risk is very high on it, so it's not triggering with Katie. But for me, it's still one that I go, okay, it has a lot of nice bullish components. The next higher low, boom, I want in. And so I think there are 3 really good stocks kind of showing their stripes here today, and, giving that. We also have Booking, BKNG, which is formerly known as Priceline. But it's also kind of doing that same thing as American Airlines. It has the 3-7 crossover going on. Now, the consolidation risk is a little too high to trigger with Katie, but has that 3-7 crossover action that you want to see. And this is one I really can't trade for the challenge right now. I can't even put it on its watch list because of earnings upcoming and the option pricing there with it. But when we see Katie signals ahead of earnings, yeah, there's a pretty decent track record, but again, this is not a Katie signal, even though it has that 3-7 crossover action associated to it. I've been very interested to see how the banks hold up. Right, yesterday they rallied, they performed very well in the morning. They gave up into the close, as the market got sold off. These aren't anything close to setting a bullish signal like a 3-7 crossover or anything. Been very interested to see how they hold up. they've been sold into pretty much here most of the day. They're off their highs. We do see J.P. Morgan, holding a little bit of a gain here, but they still don't have the 3-7 crossover associated with them, or anything of that nature just yet. So while we're starting to see a few small signs of life in the banks, still nothing for me to say, hey, you know what? Let me go and let's get aggressive here, and go for it. So, as we go forward, you see things like Honeywell that gapped up nicely yesterday. It's just still kind of the same thing as the market, and outside of that consumer space, we don't have a lot of things showing too much of a different differentiation out there. But we do have two trend rider signals today, and potentially one Katie signal, but the way it sits right now, no. But overall, we have this happening ahead of the MarketVibe really changing. The MarketVibe here today is still a -8. So really has not improved. The number of stocks moving above 7-day moving averages has improved, but it hasn't had that day. And generally what we will see is there will be this day where 50% of where 50% of the S&P 500 will move above the 7 all on the same day. And we just haven't seen that. We haven't seen that. That's a very common, element that we'll see when the market vibe goes from bullish or from bearish to bullish. But as I mentioned before, the way this market is going, I would expect it to go more from bearish to neutral, and then at some point neutral to bullish, rather than take that bearish to bullish jump that we've seen so many times here in the past. So anyway, that's where MarketVibe, that's where KD signals in trend riders sit right at the moment. Okay, now I have a position here on Adobe. And this is one that I've been pretty consistent in how I'm looking at it, and we've talked about, okay, I'm going to take the risk through this chopping. So far, that risk is not paying off at all. And I mentioned if we get back to the 200-day moving average, I'll look to buy more. Okay, and that's what I'm looking at. I'm looking to buy more. I mentioned it this morning. But it's not something where I go, oh, 200-day moving average, boom, buy, right? Now at this 200-day moving average, now I need to see something that says, okay, it's ready to really bounce. It's ready to bounce with some significance. And so far, I just haven't seen it. Been watching, the stock here all day. Just haven't seen it yet. We're oversold on the CCI and on the MFI, but we haven't gotten that extreme oversold that would say, hey, you know what, right here, it's just no brainer, go. And if you look, it's still trading below the 7-hour. So it's one where tomorrow, let's just say it were to gap above the 7-hour, gap up into this 238, 239 area, boom, that'd be my cue to say, time to add, time to go, time to get really aggressive here with the position. And, that's not going to happen this afternoon, but could easily come in tomorrow morning. We have a lot of tech earnings here on the board, and Facebook most notably here after the bell today, but then many more as this week progresses. Adobe's kind of trading around with Microsoft here today. Some of these cloud names are getting hit here today. Not Vulcan Materials, the VMwares, or excuse me if I could type it correctly. VMware, selling off from its highs, pretty good. A lot of these just cloud names, after yesterday, following through with some downside. IBM here as well. So, we are seeing that space just kind of all trade together, here this afternoon. Even Amazon, which, is, yes, I know it's noted as a consumer play and all of that, and rightfully so, but their growth, one of their big growth engines has been cloud, and it's down about 2.5% here today. So we're seeing most of that sector, kind of trade together here on the the day. So I may get a signal tomorrow on a gap up. If that comes in, I will look to take advantage of it. But other than that, I am going to take a look at some of these stocks that kind of give some signals here, and we've started to see some of them. You know, they give a little bit of pullback, nice hourly chart. There will be my opportunity to go. Options are still fairly expensive. They're not unplayable, but they're fairly expensive. They're unplayable for companies that have earnings this week or next. But you know, the list of stocks, you know, is growing. You know, the American Airlines of the world, you know, could start adding in and saying, okay, you know what, where does the signal come in? Where do we start to see it? And that list is increasing here day by day. A little bit later this week, I'll go through a summary of every stock that's on my list and you know, that I have here on my whiteboard here in my office. So we'll you know, we'll look at those a little bit later this week. But you know, market here going into the close, you know, no real change in its stripes as far as it's going. MarketVibe going from bearish to bullish or bearish to neutral. But I do think what we saw into the close yesterday was pretty telling that, hey, you know, these levels aren't going to get taken out in any serious way. But, you know, you have to keep in mind that's still 40 points, you know, possible downside. And a little exaggeration could still take it 80 points before some sort of, you know, whipsaw back. But I do think every tick under yesterday's low, it's almost a guarantee to get bought back up, you know, unless we have something just dramatic happen, 9/11-ish or something of that, you know, tragic type of nature there. Okay. Alrighty. Well, thanks for hopping on. Any questions, please please let me know. Tomorrow we will go and take a look at kind of generating monthly income through trading, and we'll do that here tomorrow morning, and we'll talk to you then. Take care.